Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
ArtPod is a South African-focused visual arts podcast hosted by Claude Chandler. Join me weekly every Saturday as I'm joined by a new guest who occupies a position within the visual arts community, ranging from fine arts, tattooing, framing, and logistics. Welcome to another episode of ArtPod. Today I'm joined by Alexander Tilmans. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. I met Alex through the IPAF, the International Public Arts Festival, in 2017. He was one of the organizers and I was one of the artists getting involved. Before I did this interview, I did a bit of research on you, and you've got quite the resume. I have here co-founder, owner at Baz-Art, president at Belgian Chamber in Cape Town, owner of L7 Craft Beer SA, and financial director at EXO Events, and financial director at Travel by EXO. You're quite the busy man.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, good morning, Claude. Depends on the days, but it's nice to work with teams that help you and carry projects, and they kind of all fit a little bit with one another.
And so let's just start off with Baz-Art. Baz-Art's main focus is around street art, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Around street art, around public art, around graffiti, depends how you position it. What we realize is that in Cape Town, graffiti has got like kind of a bad connotation, especially around the general public or around government. So by phrasing it public art, it means that it's art that needs to please the public, and that's how you can carry on painting and putting out messages. So we like to put positive message, and painting positive message creates a positive form of art and is appreciated by the public.
And street art, I mean, why did you find interest in that?
So it started about maybe 6 years ago when I started brewing.
Okay.
So by making beer, it's kind of an artisanal process. It's kind of a craft process. Like you do everything with your hands. You have to be creative. You have to come up with a recipe, but then you have to come up with a label. Then you have to come up with packaging. And surrounding myself with artists, creatives, and designers, I realized first that it was very similar to beer or to being a chef in a restaurant. The creative process was very similar. And from there, I realized that street artists were always a little bit marginalized compared to the other guys, to the designers, to the fine art artists that have got more exposure. The street artists were a little bit less showcased, and it was that Baz-Art was how can we help them get to the same level as a graphic designer, as an illustrator, as a fine art artist. How can all artists be kind of at the same level? And Baz-Art started on that basis.
And I guess for something like that, I think for it to be sustainable is the best goal. How did you feel the approach was to kind of make it economically or financially viable, or was it just more of the love of it and see where that goes?
To be very honest, very, very honest. So as you said, my background is in finance, and a couple of years ago I did not believe in NGOs at all, because I did not believe that it could be sustainable and sustainably funded. If you believe grants are just going to come to you, or subsidies are just going to come to you, no, it's not the case. And if you receive subsidies for 1 or 2 years and then they disappear, then it's finished. Then you have to stop your project. So the whole idea, as you said, is how to make it sustainable and how to make it so that you never rely on one source of fund.
Yes.
So with street art, the first thing that came to mind is, well, let's find work for artists. And if we can find regular work, regular commission work, then it becomes a viable source of income. And clients can be many. If you paint in the streets, the client can be your local resident, it can be your local mall, it can be a property developer, it can be a marketing agency that wants to put a campaign. So it's kind of, there's no real limit for it, and you can find a wide array of clients, and that makes it sustainable.
I mean, it almost sounds like an untouched market. If you think of Cape Town and the art scene, there's galleries all over the place. And I guess street art, as you said, with the negative connotations, and I guess it being quite difficult to make it a commercial venture, there was this, I guess, as an open market there.
That there was an open market, I would say, in the sense that Cape Town compared to the rest of South Africa put regulation on painting in the streets, so it makes it a relatively lengthy application process, and the application needs to be approved by Art and Culture, by Heritage, by Traffic, and so on and so on. So of course it puts barrier to street artists to paint commercially. So by helping that process and facilitating that process, as well as facilitating scaffold, facilitating paint, that makes it easier, and yeah, we fulfill a niche. But you have to think that in South Africa there's about 120 street artists, like pure street artists.
Oh really? I didn't even think the number was that high.
And all those guys have been living somehow through little jobs, and so the market was existent. I think where we come in is that we facilitate a lot. We put the infrastructure or the structure in place so that as an artist you can come and do your job, and you don't have to stress about who's going to put the scaffold. Is the scaffold safe enough, or do I have the permission, or am I going to be arrested? So we facilitate. We come and play the role of the facilitator.
I guess for artists, admin is just their weakest point. And then I can also imagine for street artists, as you said, there's so much bureaucracy that you have to go through, so much red tape. And I think an organization like Baz-Art, as you say, is great as a facilitator. And I think anyone, say in government or behind a desk, having a kind of a figurehead like Baz-Art saying, these guys are legit, we're going to handle the process, it's all on board, kind of, makes everything run a bit smoother. And I can imagine the street art community really appreciates that. Has there been any kind of pushback from the street art community with the whole thing maybe being a bit more commercialized, or are they celebrating it?
I would distinguish the street art community between the guys that have been in the scene for a very long time, and it's kind of a change for them. They see there's a new movement, and they don't know how to embrace it. And they're like, we can see there's more activity, we want to be part of it, but at the same time, we don't want it to fall back to where it was.
Okay.
But then we see some younger guys that are very eager and that want to learn and progress and strive every day and fight and get it to a level where they live from street art. And so there's a bit of a young and old generation type. And you have to think that street art is also very family crew oriented. Like artists have their groups, especially when we speak about the graffiti and the tagging, like people work in clans. And so as Baz-Art, we don't care about clans, we embrace everyone. So if you have talent or if you want to develop your talent, we take you on board and we'll find you jobs.
And you find with the street art community, do a lot of them come from, say, more graffiti background, and then kind of as their skills develop and they want to kind of have a more of a public accessible art form, they kind of tap into street art? or is it full-on street art, or do you find a lot of street artists maybe do street art and then fine art, or street art and another career?
I think, well, first I think it has evolved quite a bit since you painted with us in 2017.
Yes.
We got to know the landscape better, and there are different type of artists. Well, you came from fine art, but at the time in 2017 they were pretty hardcore street artists, part of the group and part of Baz-Art.
Yes.
And I think by now we have got, I would say, three type of artists painting outside. The street artists is definitely a core group. The other artists that have never painted outside, and that includes fine art, illustration, graphic design, and it's people that have been working mainly inside or for galleries and are like, well, I want to paint a big wall too. And that's great because they come with a different angle, a different technique, different eye, and then you have another category which we haven't spoken about yet, as the guys that were already painting billboards, for example.
Okay.
And if you look more in the less privileged areas or in townships, there's a lot of painting. There's a lot of signs that are painted, and some of those guys have a lot of talent too. And they've been doing billboards for 15 years. They're not called street artists, even though they are. And this is a category which I appreciate personally very much, because those guys strive for their business. They really push to get the job done, because that's what they live on.
Yeah, do you find it, I mean, they sound very professional. Does that make your life a lot easier working with kind of business-orientated artists who kind of understand the steps and the logistics of operating a kind of a commercial venture?
I wouldn't say business oriented. That's a bit harsh.
Okay. Is it a dirty word?
No. It sounds like suit and tie type of thing. No, definitely not business oriented, but someone that is passionate about his work and is passionate about the quality of his work and wants to do the best he can. That's always nice, because if you don't care, well, then we're not sure if your job is going to be great or not, and that's not. I don't enjoy it. I like the artist to be proud and the client to be happy.
Yes.
And if you're slacking, it's tough.
I remember going back to the fine art, going into street art when I was doing my piece. And I was using my traditional technique of the stamping process, and I was stamping the word carbon, and one of the locals walks past and says, is your street name Carbon? Is that your tag name? And I'm like, oh no, I'm a fine artist. And she looked at me like very confused, like, fine? And she's like, I know you, Carbon, and walked off. I love that moment. But I mean, for me as a fine artist, it was just great. Yeah, working with scale like that, and then also just, I don't want to sound cheesy, but just a bit of giving the work a bit of street cred in a way, like laying it into the urban space and living there. I think, having it boxed into a gallery or having it on canvas is one thing, but I mean, once, doing that one piece, the bug bit, and I just saw the magic and the impact it has. And I mean, for me also, every week getting a ping on my phone on Instagram and someone taking a selfie in front of it is just the nicest compliment I could ever get. And that was in 2017. That's when you launched the International Public Arts Festival. Now, how did that come about, and how much planning went into that?
And so for 2017, the planning was as I said at the beginning, how can we give more awareness to street art? And that was by combining fine art and street art, or fine artist and street artist, and calling it public art. That allowed us to unlock government and make people appreciate it and consider it as pieces of art, as walls are pieces of art, and they can they can communicate a message. They can speak, and they can make people interested in looking the walls. Just as you said, like having a ping on Instagram, it means that someone has been looking at your wall every day.
Yes.
It means that someone appreciated it every day too, because otherwise they wouldn't have taken a picture. And that shows like how public art, and I keep on referring to public art because it's art for the public, works and interests people. And by painting, so you painted your wall, and by now in that same area of Salt River there's 100 walls that have been painted. It means that every day some people are looking at it, taking pictures and talking about it, and they're talking about the message of, oh, why is there children looking at books in the library painted in large scale on the wall? Why is there those little men stacked onto one another painted in the corner of that house? And it makes people speak, it makes people communicate, and when we find the neighborhood is also getting closer together, like there's more cohesion, like you know your neighbor because now you chatted about the wall that's painted in your other neighbor's house and you wonder what that is because, and then you start a conversation. It makes the neighborhood way more cohesive. Not only it makes it more colorful because there's suddenly plenty of color, but it makes it more cohesive, and that's very interesting. It's a very interesting process to see, like people spending more time in the street, people discussing about walls, and actually discussing about art at the end of the day.
And for the past 3 years, they've all taken place in Salt River. Is there a reason to that? The initial reason was the resident of Salt River and the representative of the resident of Salt River felt they were a little bit tucked between Woodstock and Observatory, and Salt River was kind of a forgotten place, and they wanted to have something that was not too noisy, like a big music festival, yes,
but something that inspires. And public art was a good medium and was something they appreciated, and they say, well, I think that can be what the future of Salt River could look like. That's how it started. And then one of the reasons why we continue there, it's relatively simple. It's if you come and paint as an artist in Salt River for 10 days, we'll get to know you. And that will allow us to find you other works around South Africa. So we want to stay in Salt River so that we get to know you in Salt River, but then we can find your work outside of Salt River. If we were to paint everywhere, then everything would be scattered and everyone would want free walls. And that's not the goal.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely been a transformation in the Salt River area and community, and you've done a really great job in terms of getting the community involved. Can you just explain a bit more about how you got the community and the community leaders on board? So
it's quite a lengthy process. So now we are 3 years later. Now residents offer us wall and artists have lunch with the residents, but it didn't happen overnight. It's a lot of time spent with people, houses to houses, chat, convince the old lady or convince the young one sometime, or the grumpy husband, to show that colors on walls makes it brighter, makes it cleaner, makes it safer. The more people in the street, the more safe the neighborhood is. So it has been a long conversation, and but it has been appreciated over time and from the beginning too, but more and more until now, where residents really embrace it. When artists come and paint during the festival, they invite the artists to sleep over, share Cook Sisters, and have tea at 4 o'clock, and the kids come and help and paint. So it's very pleasing to see that residents are embracing it.
And what I also loved was you trained up a bit of the community to do the street tours when the festival wasn't taking place, but it was still in some way operating, and there was a bit of cash being generated or a bit of kind of work being made. And then even I remember in the 2017 one, instead of getting kind of food trucks and such, you got the local community, the mamas to kind of cook the big biryani dishes and run the catering.
So it's part of the sustainability aspect, I would say, is that as much as we can, 100% of the suppliers, from scaffold to paint to food to drinks, should be coming from Salt River. So that's what we strive for. We want everything to be coming from Salt River so that it develops the economy of Salt River. But the festival is only 10 days, and those 100 walls are there every day of the week. So we thought, well, two ladies were very keen in becoming tour guides. So we paid the training and the accreditation, and now they are full-time street art tour guides, and they can guide locals, travelers, foreigners through Salt River, making them discover what the neighborhood and the community is about, and what the art on the wall is about too, and what is the message that the artists were trying to communicate, and they are starting to make a living out of that area and that piece of art that has been developing.
And people interested in doing a Salt River public arts tour, how do they find that? What website? Or
they find it on our website, on Airbnb, and we just teamed up with someone that is called Juma, that has been in doing street art tours for 7 years. Started in Woodstock and now has joined us in Salt River. So Juma's tour are quite known. Baz-Art you'll find on the website, or Airbnb Experience. That's probably the easiest. Everybody will remember that.
Okay, cool. And also Salt River being quite a Muslim community, is there any navigating around that? Well, not around that, but kind of how... Oh, well, we have light in our booth. It just needed a bit of a warm up. What's the kind of process in terms of, I mean, for artists, I'm sure proposals have to be made, because I think there are certain...
I'll help you there. So, yeah, Salt River being preeminently Muslim, in order to paint on walls, you have to be respectful. And I think it's not only tied to religion, it's tied to anywhere you paint. And that's why, again, we say public art, because it needs to please the public. So Salt River being Muslim, we paint respecting their beliefs or their culture, and we put up art that's not gonna shock, affect the people that are gonna watch it. So it's always in a respectful way, and any message you can think of, you can positively put it on a wall in a respectful way.
Great. And then, yeah, just as you said, Salt River being kind of a base, and then finding new platforms or new areas and walls for your artists. I mean, recently there was that piece on Harrington Street with the dog wearing the aviator glasses. And I mean, in terms of scale and quality, I mean, you see it on Instagram and you have that sense it's like this kind of Instagram magic space. It could never happen around me. But what I've also seen is, I mean, that was an international artist, correct?
Correct.
I mean, since 2017, the International Public Arts Festival has definitely got a lot more international. Have you found that with having a kind of a resume and a portfolio now of these festivals, is it easier to get new artists on board, and specifically international artists?
Yeah, so it's actually very easy to get artists on board. But it's maybe because we're doing it in a way that pleases them too. So every year we try to respect a 50-50 ratio, or we respect a 50-50 ratio. Mm-hmm. So it's 50% South African, 50% international. And the international come from actually all over the world without distinction. I think every second day we receive a resume of an artist that wants to participate, and then it's what the big thing on how to make it happen is that, well, do we or is there the finance for the artist to come? Who is going to cover his accommodation, his flight, his meals, his paint, and his lifting equipment. So as soon as we find ways to secure that funding, sometimes through embassies, sometimes through private donors, then yes, the artist is coming. So that's how it works for international artists. For local artists, it's of course way easier because, well, they live here and they have friends in Cape Town, so it's easier to work with and to accommodate them.
So the international guys are just sending you resumes. They just know it's a thing and they want to get on board. Or do you do a bit of fishing?
We don't do much fishing at all. They actually send their resume, and the word, there's about 30 street art festivals around the world, so it's not a huge scene. And among the 30 festivals around the world, we're known to be a very community-oriented festival where the interaction with the house owner or the building owner is very strong. So you actually, as an international artist, you get, not only you come to beautiful Cape Town and you can enjoy the penguins and the beach, but you get a real experience with residents of the city. And most festivals are not like that. Most festivals around the world is paint a big wall in a city. Here it's, well, experience the resident and live and do your artwork with that person.
And has there kind of been an exchange program in a sense, or has it got there yet where you're sending South African artists abroad?
So we've done it a couple of times, not enough to my eye. One artist went to Reunion Island, another one went to Mexico. I hope to do it a lot more often. Working on it, looking for opportunities. Anyone that listens.
No, for sure. And then I guess we can expect the next International Public Arts Festival in February 2020.
Exact.
And it runs in conjunction also with the Cape Town Art Fair. Is that planned or?
It's totally planned. February is kind of the month of art in Cape Town. Galleries are open. Cape Town, the Contemporary Art Festival is there. There's Design in Daba is just after. So it's kind of February, the month of art, and we want to be part of it, and we want to show that that street art, or international public art, but street art at the end of the day has got its space also in the art industry.
Well, our time's run out, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Alex, for having a conversation with me, and thank you so much for the work you've done in the public arts community, and it's just amazing to see it grow. And yeah, as you said, if anyone wants to get in touch, they can go to the main website, Baz-Art.com or co.za. Great.
So Baz-Art.co.za. Thank you very much,
Cool,
Claude.
thanks, Alex.
Nice chatting.
Cheers.
Bye.
ArtPod is a South African-focused visual arts podcast hosted by Claude Chandler and produced by the generous assistance of Blended Podcasts, brought to you by Blended Audio.